Is the Contax T2 really worth the hype? I'm gonna give you guys an honest review of if I think the Contax T2 is really worth the money. I've had this camera since February, so I've had it for about 6 months now, and I've shot probably like 10 rolls of film through it at this point. This has been my everyday go-to camera. I bring it with me on trips, on vacations. It's just so easy and compact. So I have used it a ton since I've gotten it. Definitely used it more than any of my other film cameras. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Contax T2, it is a 35mm point and shoot camera with a fixed 38mm 2.8 lens. It was released in 1991 and it has a titanium body, which is really nice and just like durable. And it's also super popular. It's definitely been made famous by celebrities, like I believe one of the Jenners, and a lot of influencers use this camera. Retails for about $1,000+. It's definitely more on the expensive side, so let's get into the review and see if it's really worth your money. Okay, so the reason that I purchased this camera, I have a number of other film cameras. I have the Elon 7, which is a larger like SLR camera, and then I have a Pentax, which is a fully manual SLR, and I have a rangefinder. I didn't have any point and shoots, and all of those are just kind of bulky and they're not really super fast cameras to use, so I wanted something more compact and easy to carry around and just quick, so that if I'm with friends, if I'm traveling, exploring, I don't have to take a bunch of time to be messing with my settings, and I can just take photos kind of like quickly and in the moment. So that's why I went for a point and shoot. I looked at the Leica Mini Lux, and then I also know that there are like way cheaper point and shoots out there, but I did want something with nicer glass because I thought, you know, I may be using this for sessions. I do a film add-on for my wedding, so I was like thinking of it being an investment into that film add-on. So that's why I got the Contax T2. I purchased it on eBay. It shipped from Japan, I think, and it's in decent condition. So normal wear and tear, I didn't get like a mint camera. It has some scratches on the body right here, but it doesn't really bother me. It's like a super old camera. I don't expect it to be perfect. And I bought it for about $1,100, including the shipping. Another reason I went with the Contax over a basic point and shoot like a Sure Shot or something in like the $100 to $200 range is because I wanted something that gave me a little bit more control over my settings. Being a wedding photographer, I obviously shoot in manual, and I'm used to just having like way more control over my lighting and just overall the outcome of the photo. So I wanted something that gave me a little bit of control without having to be like fully manual. Okay, so let's talk about some of the pros and the cons of the camera. Obviously the biggest pro is the quality. The build quality, the titanium body is amazing quality, and then the lens quality is why most people absolutely love this camera. For Contax to make a point and shoot with a lens that stops down to 2.8 and it's like really nice Carl Zeiss glass is a rare thing, and that's why this camera became so popular. When this camera came out, it was definitely aimed towards like the higher end market. It wasn't like a basic everyday point and shoot aimed towards like the middle class. It was like a luxury camera, and that's why it's still priced so high. But yeah, the quality is amazing, and that's obviously like the biggest plus. That's why I bought the camera, is because I knew that the lens quality was amazing. Another thing that I like about this is that you're able to over and underexpose your film. So on the back of the camera, you can choose from like 0.5 to 2 stops to under or overexpose your film. I personally like to overexpose Portra 400 by a half a stop to a stop, or I like to be able to underexpose if I know that that will look the best in the lighting scenario, so it does give you that little bit of control that you wouldn't get in another point and shoot. It auto loads the film, which is amazing. I'll insert a clip while I'm talking, but you basically just put the film in, drag it across the camera, and then you don't have to do any of the winding or anything. The camera does it for you, and then it also rolls the film back up after you finish a roll, so it's really nice that that's automatic. I love that it has a built-in flash and that you don't have to like turn it off every time you turn your camera on, because some point and shoots you have to turn off the flash setting if you want to just be shooting with the natural light. With the Contax, you can choose either to shoot with natural light and choose your aperture, or you can choose to turn the flash on. There's 2 different settings, so there's regular flash, and then there's the setting that is supposed to eliminate red eye, so the flash fires twice to combat red eye. Honestly, don't know how that works, but I use it a lot just because you have a lot less flexibility with film than with digital when it comes to editing, so if I can avoid the red eye, then I use that setting for the flash. I like that it auto reads the film. Again, one less thing that you have to worry about. You might not like this if you like to rate your film differently than what the roll is, but again, you can choose to over or underexpose the film, so that may help. I like that it has a self-timer. I honestly barely use this, but if you wanted to, it's cool for if you want to set it up on a tripod or on vacation, you want to get some self-timer photos of you and another person. I think that's really nice. I don't think that's super common in point and shoots, but I could be wrong. And lastly, one of the biggest pros for me was the size. I didn't want to be carrying around a huge camera. This was supposed to be like more of an everyday travel camera that still had great quality. So if I didn't want to bring my digital SLR camera or my mirrorless camera, I could bring this one. The lens retracts back into the body, so it's just like flat, could fit in your pocket, fits in my Lulu belt bag, fits in any purse. It's just really nice and compact. Okay, some of the cons. So the 2.8 setting on the lens is also like an automatic setting. So the lens will either shoot at 2.8 or whatever aperture is best if the highest shutter speed is still not fast enough to compensate for the amount of light coming into the camera. So if I'm out in a really sunny situation and I want to be shooting at 2.8, well, the fastest aperture on the camera I believe is 500. So it would probably change the aperture automatically for me to be closer to like f8. However, all of the other aperture settings from 4 to 16, you can choose them and it won't change that aperture setting. It will only change the shutter speed. One of the biggest cons is that this camera is really hard / impossible to repair because Contax is no longer a company and this is a very old camera, so they're not making parts for it anymore. Honestly, a lot of people say if this camera breaks, then it breaks, and that's just like $1,000 out the window. So if that does not sound appealing to you, I would not necessarily recommend buying this camera. Honestly, it's something that I probably should have thought through more. There are definitely more modern film cameras out there that were released like much later, maybe in the 2000s, that are repairable, because yeah, the idea of this breaking just like really sucks. Another con is that the closest distance that you can be to the camera for it to focus is 0.7 meters, which is like a couple feet, I believe, so you can't really get super close-up shots. I know that with other cameras, point-and-shoot cameras specifically, like the Fujifilm class, I think it's like 0.3 meters, maybe 0.5 meters, so you can get like more close-up shots. But yeah, with this one, if I'm too close to a subject, it will misfocus because it just can't focus that close. So that's like a small con that I would say I have noticed. And then lastly is the price. Now, when I bought this, I bought it for around $1,100, but now I know it's retailing for even more than that. Film has just become so popular, especially with the rise of influencers and Instagram and TikTok. It's really popular in the wedding community and a lot more people are starting to shoot film, which I think is a great thing. Our film lab here locally is busier than ever and I think that's awesome. But it's definitely driven up the price of this camera and I do think that it is overpriced, to be honest. It's still a great camera. I wouldn't say it's overhyped because I think it lives up to the hype, but maybe not for like an $1,100 to $1,500 price tag. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have it in the color champagne, I believe. I'll look that up after. So is the Contax T2 worth it? I think that if you own a business and offering film is a part of your business and you would like to make an investment, it could be worth the price tag. It's a great quality camera. But if you're just a hobbyist and you want to find a film camera with a nice lens, there are other alternatives out there that are way less. For the hobbyist, I think that the Canon SureShot or the Olympus MJU, don't know how to say that. Those are great options. I think they're like $50. And honestly, they take some nice pictures. One of my friends has one of those cameras and her photos always look really good. I definitely don't think you need to spend like $500+ to have good photos from a film camera. However, if you are looking for something that stops down to 2.8 so you get that nice bokeh, I would definitely recommend looking into the Fujifilm class. I haven't ever used it, but I've watched a couple review videos on it and people seem to really like it. Stops down to 2.8. I believe the lens is also a 38mm. I could be wrong about that, it might be 28. That one retails for around $500 and it's more modern. Fuji obviously like still exists as a company, so I would think that it would be easier to repair than something like the Contax. I also wanted to add in, if you're a photographer and you're looking for a camera that gives you a little bit more control over your images, I definitely would recommend looking into the Canon Elan series. This is a Canon Elan 7E, and basically it looks just like the 5D series. Like the body looks exactly the same. The button setup is really similar, so if you have that muscle memory from using a 5D Mark III or Mark IV, it's basically the same. And it takes EF glass. So these lenses that I can put on the camera are my really nice L lenses. The image quality is super sharp. I'll insert some photos as I'm talking. But yeah. Love this camera, and if you're looking for something that gives you a bit more control, I would recommend going with this one instead. If you're looking for an everyday camera, I would recommend going with a point and shoot. Now, I wanted to insert some sample photos. Right now, I'm gonna run through a bunch of photos shot on Portra 400, which is the main film stock that I use. But I also have a roll that I shot on Lomography, and then I also use Fuji 200 a lot. Used to love Fuji 400, but I believe it's discontinued. So I hope that this review helped if you're looking into purchasing a Contax T2. It is my everyday camera. I don't think that I'm going to be buying any other point and shoots anytime soon because I don't really need one. This camera does a great job at everything. Do I think that everyone should go out and spend like $1,000 on it? No, definitely not, especially because the chances of it being able to be repaired if it breaks are relatively low. However, I hope that those mentions of the alternative cameras are helpful as well. If you want to see more content on film photography, let me know in the comments and I can do some more film camera reviews, how to shoot on film, behind the scenes on a film photo shoot. Make sure to follow along on Instagram to see more film work. I'm always posting weddings and sessions that I shot on film on my main account, Grace Torres Photo, and on my film account, Grace Torres Film. Forgot to add this in here, but the autofocus is also pretty good on this camera. You can tell once the camera has locked focus on something because you get an indicator on the screen. I've definitely missed focus on photos, but it's more user error. I think like the subject was too close to me or I just locked focus in the wrong place and I couldn't tell. You don't have manual focus controls. You can focus to infinity though. And I use that when I shoot landscapes, but that's really it. I would say out of a roll of 36 exposures, maybe only like 2 to 3 are out of focus, and that's if I'm just like moving really fast and not thinking about what I'm doing. If I'm really focused on what I'm doing and like paying attention and everything and it's a more controlled environment, then I would say I have a lot more success with my focus. But one thing that I do like is having the manual focus control on that Elon 7 because especially at weddings, I just like to know that things are going to be tack sharp. But that's just the beauty of film, is things are imperfect, things are messy, things aren't always in focus, things aren't always clear, sometimes there's motion blur, so I think it's all part of the experience. And my clients who add the film add-on, they know that. I always disclose there's gonna be maybe 1 or 2 that are blurry, out of focus, but that's just part of film.